We are.
Yay, I'm alive.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay, it's totally not like we were on FaceTime like 2 minutes ago or anything.
No,
It's not like
nothing.
that at all. No, 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 of course not.
No,
No,
nothing about that.
it was like 3 minutes ago.
It's fine. Hi. So,
Hi.
creator, director, writer, Justin Janoson.
Yeah,
Congratulations for
thank you.
joining. Okay.
Thank you. Somehow we're like good friends, even though we've never met in person. It's weird like that.
It's fine. Yeah. If
Yeah,
anyone's curious about the history, we've never met before, but we
no,
are virtually friends, aren't
yay.
we?
And we've
And
been in
I
things
am going
together.
to, right. And I'll be interviewing you about your new show, What's the Rule? I mean, I'm pretty sure if people are following, they know all about it.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. I have one question for you, Justin, that I'm actually interested myself. I think a lot of these questions I am simply interested in myself, and hopefully other people will find them interesting. Maybe that's a little selfish, but I don't know. No, something I'm interested in, Justin, is what if someone came up to you, maybe it was someone you'd never met before, someone from Canada, I don't know. If they came up to you and asked you what are 3 words you would use to describe yourself, what would they be? It's a very like deep question. Whoa.
Uh, 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 I don't know. I just say caring, creative, uh,
Another C word.
I'm just gonna say neurodiverse, I guess.
Caring, creative, and neurodiverse. Well, it fits the theme of the interview. So great answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
answer. Caring, creative, and neurodiverse. What makes you say caring? What do you think has influenced your caringness in your life?
I don't know. Well, I do know. It's because I grew up with a twin sister who is autistic, and growing up, I was a lot of the times I was raised taking care of her pretty much, and I still feel like the older brother, even though we're twins, but we both learn from each other, and I just try to like make sure that I can help as many people as possible with whatever I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great answer. So you're caring in every sense of the word, emotionally, and you actually physically have had to care for people your whole
Yeah.
life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we'll find out that that's some inspiration behind the show.
Mm.
A little bit more just about you, kind of fluffy little questions. What were your favorite TV shows or movies when you were growing up? And as a filmmaker today, I'm wondering if they had any influence on your
Yeah.
style and how your voice is today.
This is okay. So my favorite shows growing up when I first I really remember where I would get home every day and turn on channel 122 to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender on Nicktoons.
Yeah.
I grew up very much watching a lot of iCarly, and I recently rewatched it, which they don't have anything past I think season 6 on Paramount Plus, and it kind of made me angry.
iCarly's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's great. And like I'm just talking growing up stuff, Big Time Rush, and then the show Bones too was just a huge. That one's like different than the others, but.
Mm-hmm.
And then wait, what was
And
the second?
how do you think it's funny you bring up something like iCarly that some people would see as more of a children's show? How do you think having shows like that which had such a big influence on you, so much so that you would bring them up now, way when you're an adult, how do you think they influence your voice as a creator today?
Well, I I'm going to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender for a second because that was a show that I really, really grew up with and really loved, and
Sure.
has seen a recent resurgence since it got put up on Netflix.
Yes,
And
yes.
growing up,
I actually, one of my friends was watching it today when I FaceTimed him, so that's funny.
yeah, I grew up watching that, and one thing I loved about that show, which is what I'm trying to do with What's the Rule too, is you can tune, even though it's like there's an overall story arc going on throughout the show, you can tune into any episode and pretty much get what's going on, but you're just
Yeah,
rewarded for watching the whole thing through. And
exactly.
I love that, and I miss that with a lot of TV where you can't, like with the age of Netflix and binge culture, you can't really watch something just one episode.
Hmm.
It's not, it doesn't really, Netflix isn't designed for that. And that's
Hmm.
something that I'm trying to bring back with What's the Rule, because it's the kind of show that you see yourself in, and you kind of want to, you want to feel like you're going through with these characters in their journey. And although it's not
Hmm.
a world-ending apocalypse, it's still a lot of fun, I guess.
Totally, totally. I totally agree with what you said about being able to just watch an episode and know what's going on without having seen the entire series, even though there is a general story arc happening. I have experiences with that, if you don't mind me interjecting myself a little bit. I have, like, The Office is my all-time favorite show.
Yeah.
And it's like a friend that you can call up at any time, at any place. If that was, going into any season, any episode, and you could just watch it and understand completely what's happening. And it's like, it's comfort. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the age of streaming, like you say. Yeah, it's really great. And I really enjoy that you said that about it. Now, more into kind of filmmaking and storytelling. Where does your passion for storytelling come from? We talk about you having been influenced by shows like Avatar, but where does that passion inside of you from storytelling come from? If you can trace it. If you can't, I get that completely. But do you know, is there a point in your development that you said that you realized this passion or something that triggered it?
Well, I grew up very unsure of what I wanted to do, just because how I was raised and my family situation, everything like that. Because my parents wanted, or my mom specifically wanted me, was like very adamant that I was going to be a lawyer growing up, and I do not like talking in front of people, pretty much. So,
Ironic.
that was a question. But there was one day when I was a little kid, and there were two things that I got. One was a flip video camera, which kind of changed my world. And the other was an iPod Nano with a video camera that also kind of changed everything. They were both really bad, like no good. They did not shoot good video, but I didn't really know the difference at the time, And with my friends in the backyard, when I was in elementary school, at least we were creating like movies where one of my friends, we almost knocked each other's heads off because we started hitting each other with, or not hitting each other, but like we wanted to have a lightsaber, but we didn't have plastic lightsabers. So we took giant baseball bats, like metal baseball bats, and we started hitting each other, or not hitting each other, but hitting the bats to them. We didn't hurt each other, but we could have seriously hurt each other.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And that's kind of where it all started, and just being very imaginative in these adventures that I would create with, specifically my friend Kyle growing up. We would have these stories of like just random things, these continuing things. We had this game called Alien Invasion where we just continue the story pretty much every week, and we just run around the house with Nerf guns and things.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you kind of found that on the video. So you had kind of that like many people do, like an innate childhood sense of imagination and creativity, but then when you found your video became available just at your fingertips when we were little, that's kind of ignited that flame a little bit for you.
Yeah. And it wasn't really, I didn't really get into making and writing or being confident in it until I went to Herrick's High School. I'm wearing the shirt for Battle of the Classes now, and I took a TV studio with Mr. Brogan, who's not watching this, but just going to shout him out anyway. He's one of the greatest teachers I've ever had the pleasure of having, and he really inspired and pushed me to go for it, and I managed to become the president of the club my senior year, and then I found it in my car yesterday. I don't know why it's in my car, but it's the Herrick's High School Achievement Award for Outstanding Achievement in Video Production.
Oh,
Mouthful,
wow.
no? But I found it in my car. I don't know why it was in my car, but I found it in my car. So,
Well, like a sign maybe from the universe.
yeah.
That's really awesome. My next question was if you can trace back a specific moment or certain set of moments that where you first started to take steps towards actually making your own art and creating your own things. So that's really interesting, and that's sweet that you have a specific teacher too that you remember really encourage you. I think so many people who go on to create art, I mean, people in general, even if they're not creating anything, have people in high school who they remember for the rest of their lives, which is so important that you had that. So it's really nice to hear.
Yeah, no, and also it just wasn't one teacher too, because while Brogan I think had the biggest hand in it, like there were other teachers. Like I broke my leg sophomore year.
Oh, wow.
For you, it's grade 10. For me, it's 10th grade. I couldn't participate in sports for I think it was 2 years because it never healed properly.
Oh, wow.
Still kind of iffy on if it's healed, but whatever. And I was writing. I really did not love sports at the time, so my gym teachers gave me another option where I could write and analyze movies. So I started analyzing movies, and they said, "Wow." I'd take what I didn't like in movies and I'd rewrite and say, this is what I would have done or how I would have told the story. And they really liked it. And that was just a very interesting thing for me to, because I mean, gym class is the least place where you're going to expect to be writing films. So
creatively fulfilled, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm also wondering if so I know that I'm not sure how many people who follow What's the Rule or will follow What's the Rule know that you are pretty accomplished for a student. You've had quite a few projects that you've actually actualized and worked on. Actualized, that might not be a good phrase, but
yeah.
I'm wondering if in that process you've found kind of a favorite not a niche, but a favorite part of the filmmaking process, whether that's in pre-production, casting or something, or whether it's writing or in post. What's your favorite part that you've found so far?
Because I love each step for different reasons. Like
totally, yeah.
The step that gives me the most anxiety, honestly, is the pre-production phase, because pre-production is your make or break phase. If you don't succeed in pre-production, you're gonna fail. There's no way around it. And growing up, especially being somebody with ADHD, I don't like sticking to plans. I really don't, which is which is a big problem, because when I deviate from a plan, it doesn't usually work out. But I try to stick to the plans, and when I do, sometimes there's things that need to be changed, and because I can change on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
But in regular production, I just love working with people, working with actors, working on set, being there. It's just this exhilarating feeling there, like I'm unstoppable. And then post-production, you're basically rewriting the story, whether I'm editing it myself or I have another editor with me and we're working on it together. There's this thing where you get to rewrite the story, and if something wasn't working, you get to figure it out and fix it, which is something I love, problem solving, fixing the puzzles.
So cool. Yeah, I really like that you problem solving is a huge thing. You hear all the time watching interviews with other accomplished people in the film industry. You hear that it's just problem solving, especially for directing. It's problem solving in a job, you know. There's so many, it seems like when you see it on screen, it's such a seamless, beautiful story that's been put together. You assume it comes from paper to screen exactly and seamlessly, but can be farther from the truth, right? Now I'm wondering if I'll circle back a little bit to we were talking about your passion as a storyteller. I'm wondering if you've had any experiences, as we mentioned, that have kind of fueled the fire. So not necessarily what's your favorite part of the process, but do you have any specific memories or experiences on a project that have really added to your passion as a storyteller and is kind of carrying you along? Because obviously you're in film for,
Yeah.
you're in school for film, we should mention.
Yeah.
Is there anything, any memory or experience you feel has fueled that fire a lot for you?
Well, one of the most interesting things that I've ever worked on was this short I made. It's still up on YouTube. It's not my best work. It's called Dreamers, and the production process was a mess. It was this hodgepodge. The group wasn't really working together, and it was this big mess because we were kind of just forced to live with each other in this project. This was in high school. And I remember having to really step up and like try and problem solve and try and figure out where every piece can work and where all these things were. And we didn't get to fully finish everything by the time we had to stop production. And what I had to do is I had to think of a different way to tell the story than we had originally envisioned as a group. And it just was this huge thing of collaboration too, where I had 2 ADs, or really 4 ADs technically. We had everybody editing, we had VFX, we had to figure out all this stuff, working on like these really terrible computers that could not render out frames, and we had to figure out all this stuff, and we did it. We succeeded, and it was this aha moment where like, okay, I can make things, and I can do things, and I can create things I could create something I still love. Like, I still love this project. It's just that it's different than what it was, or how I first envisioned it.
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. That, again, you mentioned problem solving, and it's like when the problem solving is attached, because the word problem solving, you think of like math or something arduous. When it's attached though to something you're so passionate about and something that's yours and your idea that you've hatched, it's like you find passion in the problem solving, and you find beauty and art and work in the passion solving, problem solving. So it's really great that you mentioned that, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I love that. We'll switch a little bit to, again, your circumstances growing up. How do you think how you grew up, whether it was circumstances, your family, certain privileges you may have had, the location you were, anything about growing up, how do you think it has affected your voice as a filmmaker, and how do you think it continues to affect you as a filmmaker? How did it shape it in that way? I know that's pretty general, but
yeah. No, I think I get what you're saying. So as you know, and as I've mentioned in the past, but for those new that might be seeing me for the first time, I have ADHD, so I don't quite see the world the same way as everybody else. I also I have anxiety and depression and all these things, so it really kind of shaped my perceived outlook on the world, where it's like nobody sees the world quite the way that I do. It's this idea where I want to create something. Growing up, being neurodiverse, having these experiences, like when I was younger, I started a foundation before the pandemic where we'd have sensory-friendly events in the community. It all changed, and sadly we had to shut down due to COVID-19, because one of our big events was movie events, sensory-friendly movies for those who are autistic and with other disabilities that can't really sit inside a normal movie theater. We'd raise the lights and lower the volume so that you can engage in that environment, and just including different voices. That taught me that including different voices, including all these different things, really has a huge impact on myself as a storyteller, because how I write this stuff is I'm writing to tell the stories that I wanted to see growing up, where I can see myself on the screen, because I didn't always have that luxury. I didn't see a character with ADHD. I didn't see a character with a sibling with autism. I didn't see a family where kids had to go to IEP meetings. Kids had to have extra time on tests. Kids had to do all this stuff, which is very interesting because I often felt like I grew up like parallel to everyone else. Like I wasn't quite over here. I was over here where I was existing over there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So your entire way that you grew up was shifted from the norm, and you're saying that really has impacted, you know, the way you tell stories and what you tell stories about. Certainly, I think that's a great answer. Now, in your experience as a filmmaker so far, I know we mentioned problem solvings and issues that you've had on past projects. And it can be the same answer that you gave earlier, but has there been any specific experiences that have been where you have made a mistake, or you've noticed after that anything was a mistake that you have really learned from and that you are super grateful for now?
So in every single production I've ever done, I wear multiple hats. I'm usually the writer, the director, and the producer, which is a lot, especially with this kind of stuff where we're raising money and things like that. And there are a lot of things that go wrong, but no matter what, it's, even if I can, like, you always have to put that fault onto yourself to keep people motivated and happy and be there. Like if something goes wrong, like let's say somebody breaks a light or something, I'll take the fall for it. I'll do it because it's this idea that it's a collaborative medium, and if somebody's trying to blame everybody, then you're not going to have this collaborative environment that, because if everybody's blaming each other, then that's just toxicity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not productive in any way.
Nope.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and kind of taking on stressors so that the whole project isn't influenced by interpersonal conflict. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, is there anything else that you want to add about yourself and your upbringing or anything before we move on to kind of talking about the actual show? I mean, anything important that you feel is important for audiences to know?
Well, I grew up in this weird, like, world where I didn't often accept help when I needed. I didn't do a lot of things that, it's like there's one thing I can do that can like fix my life pretty much, or not fix my life, but like greatly improves one aspect of it, and you just don't do it. And it's this frustrating thing that especially people with ADHD have this problem all the time. And it's very hard sometimes to deal with it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's really important to know about, I think it's important for anyone who is interested in the project, What's the Rule, to know about you and your background, which I'm glad that we have this opportunity again to do this. But on to the actual show, I just want to know a little bit, when you had the idea, because we talk about your childhood and how it influences your voice as a filmmaker, and obviously through this project being so similar to your own life, I am wondering, when you had the idea for this specific show and this story, these characters, was it kind of a little bit of a light bulb idea, as you know, many writers get that kind of light bulb moment, or was it kind of something you'd been sitting on for a while and then it kind of just snowballed and developed into characters and into a story? Which way did it go for you?
Well, that's a good question. I've been sitting on trying to make a story like this since I was in, I think the rough versions of these characters existed when I was still in high school. I just had this idea for a story. I just said, what if two kids, one had to deal with going to the same school for the first time? Because that's something that I had to manage growing up. Like, I didn't go to private school, or neither I myself or my sister went to private school, the but it just felt like the right thing to do in that situation, and it just kind of spiraled into. And over the years, I'd think more and more, and then it wasn't until I realized that I hadn't seen an authentic portrayal of a female with ADHD that light bulb moment really went off, and I went off to the races. I was typing daily. I got super excited about it, and just all these ideas. There's like this huge list of like moments and arcs that I already have for the story, and
Yeah.
it's this kind
That's
of
a beautiful thing too, when you have an idea and you start writing and then you just don't stop writing.
yeah, and like we've
Beautiful
written
thing.
stuff together, so we both know how that stuff kind of goes,
Totally.
and it was this just idea where I wasn't sure about it, but you're never really sure. But I remember when I first sent you the script, like, I don't know how long ago is that now?
Couple of weeks.
Probably it feels longer. Wow, crazy. I remember getting a phone. You immediately started texting me saying, "I need to talk to you about this right now." And it was just like this. Yeah, it's like and you're not the first person to do that. It's just been whenever I've not had a negative reaction from this script yet, and I'm like, okay, this is a story I need to tell. It's something that's coming from my heart. And these characters too. It was this idea too from just growing up. Like, I've seen special needs moms portrayed in the spotlight. Like, I've never really seen a dad with a kid with special needs, and I'm like, how exactly would that work in the modern era? Would it be the same? Would it change how the dynamic is? And just thinking and doing all this research and compiling, there's like databases and stuff that I have now. It's crazy to think.
Yeah, so it totally sounds like it was you were sitting on the idea and then it was like light bulb, but I think that's how a lot of projects go. I think it's a lot of ebb and flow and different speeds happening, which is nice because you get a full like a fully filled out version of a story that way when you're doing the research and you're having these different ideas, like, oh, I've never seen a special needs father be portrayed in the media. We'll talk a little bit more about that conversation about the misrepresentation of neurodiversity in just a moment. I'm actually interested on the Indiegogo campaign page, which if anyone watching has not seen it, you should go check it out.
Link in bio.
You mention link in bio. You mention your influences, other stories that have influenced this one, or the way you're writing this one at least. You list things like Edge of 17, specifically Booksmart. I love that movie. It's such a great movie with Beanie Feldstein, Caitlin Dever, and directed by Olivia Wilde. Great movie. I'm wondering, what made you list Booksmart specifically as one of the inspirations for this show?
Well, to me, I loved Booksmart. When I first saw it, when I first saw it, I was unsure of how it was going to go. Like, I didn't know if it was going to be this. I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't know how much I would love it. And one of the reasons I listed it was because it's this, it's this very unique perspective of two girls on their last day of high school, and it was interesting because it's kind of structured, like, to me at least, it was structured as if like these mini short films that just happen to be a feature film, and you're just okay with it because it's so good. And I love that aspect of just growing up and trying to find your footing in the world, because I'm still trying to do that. So many of us, no matter how old you are, I think you're still trying to do that to an extent. And I also, you mentioned The Edge of 17. Interestingly enough, back when that was the first time I saw a character actually take antidepressants in a film or show or just any piece of media, and it just not be a big deal. And after all the stigma and I heard, that was when I finally decided, like, yeah, no, because I had been prescribed antidepressants, but I never really took them. And then I decided, I'm finally going to take these. And it kind of just brought my life around. And that's something I want to do for people that might be hesitant about taking ADHD medication if they may think that they need it, or
Yeah.
taking antidepressants or all anti-anxiety meds, getting help, going to therapy, all this stuff.
Totally. That's really, really interesting too, that you had such a profound impact that movie had on you. You found that in that movie, and I'm sure you're so grateful for that, and I'm sure you'd be a different person if you hadn't seen that movie. So I think it's really important when a filmmaker or any kind of storyteller brings an experience like that to a film, because I think it adds such a layer of depth, really, to the project, and they're able to maybe inadvertently even reach further out to people and address certain things. That's not something, if you were just having a huge conversation about film and what needs to change in film, that's not something that would really come up for a while, you think, right? That's not someone destigmatizing medication for a mental health reasons. That's not something that may come up very easily, but it's so important. And in your life, and I'm sure in so many other people's lives, it's had such a big impact. So finding little issues like that are so very important in your own experience consuming media, it's so cool that you're bringing it to this project specifically. Now, we talked a little bit about the process of writing, how it was kind of up and down and fast and slow. How long did it take you to actually write and finish the pilot, if you can put a number on it?
When I first actually, that's a hard question, but
It's okay if you don't have a
the first, I would say, intelligible version of the pilot I started in early September of last year, and I finished in December.
Oh,
finished
yeah.
Early December.
Yeah, so a good 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just curious. See, again, I'm just curious about certain things. How I wonder, and maybe you've already kind of touched on this a little bit just while talking about the process, but I'm wondering how it's been different than other things you've written. Obviously, there's the entire issue of writing neurodiverse characters, but I'm wondering how specifically your writing process, how was that different, writing this pilot versus any of the other things you've worked on?
Yeah, so everything else has been really films. Sure, they're short films, but they're still films, or commercials or things like that. And the characters in that, their story ends after the final page. That's it. That's their story. It's
right.
What's the rule differs a lot in that these characters' stories exist after the first episode. They grow and change, and there's still a lot of room for growth. They're constantly evolving. It's this really interesting thing where, too, because we have a lot of the cast already set, one of them I'm pretty sure is watching right now. It's this unique thing in that I have people to work with, and I know what these voices are going to be, and I'm workshopping it almost daily with them, and we're creating something very beautiful and personal for not just myself, but for a lot of the people involved, because as they're telling me about themselves, their experiences are also getting brought into the script, it's like this now become this self-fulfilling prophecy, where now that I cast it, it's just kind of writing itself, which is
right.
Not as easy as it sounds, too.
No, there's definitely certain challenges, but that's such a beautiful thing to find. in any project, specifically one that requires such a an attentive lens to it, right? And it's really nice that you have multiple people who are bringing their experiences. Now, we've talked, of course, about how this project and this story has certain parallels to your life. I'm wondering if when you were writing it, and you before you were kind of considering the other perspectives, I'm wondering if it taught you anything about yourself, because obviously writing for a lot of people can be kind of like therapy. You're bringing your whole being to a page, and somehow it always kind of seeps into the story. So I'm wondering, yeah, what has surprised you, or what has it taught you, having the voices of those characters come out onto the page through you?
Well, I think it taught me that, like, it taught me, this really taught me that I don't love, I don't love writing character bios, essentially. That's what this taught me. I know we've talked about this, but for me, what I did was I kind of just, I like to kind of, I call it method writing, where I'm going into the mind of the characters, of whose vision of the scene are we seeing this from, and most of it is Sam. So even though Sam is kind of, and I kind of have a lot of things in common, we're very different in the fact that she's a woman, I'm a dude. It's so I have this thing. We have these Spotify playlists for each of the characters, where if I need to get into their mind or their headspace, I'm going in and listening to those over and over again, and I'm just, and as I'll be on Spotify, and I'll be even just browsing music, trying to browse music as them, and trying to figure out what they would add to their playlists and what they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And you can contribute to What's the Rule on Indiegogo to get those playlists. How's that product placement? Good?
Great.
Yeah. And it's just this, it was just this, it was just this like light bulb beautiful thing, where it was like it was just a very different writing process because of how the characters are, and they're evolving, and
Yeah,
like
and you're writing such complex characters too, right? It would be important to do it in a kind of methody way, because that's how you're going to access their depth and their complexity. So yeah, I like that you mentioned that too. Now, just a little bit about the casting process too before we move on. I know it's kind of still happening, and you might not be able to talk a lot about it, but how was casting this different? I mean, there's an obvious answer because of the importance of neurodiversity, but I'm wondering, how easy has it been? How has it been moving you and moving the story?
Well, it's interesting because the casting process isn't as different as you might think. Like, we're dealing with a lot more moving parts, like agents, or I'm dealing with a lot more agents, people flying in people, things like that. And so it's different in that sense, but at the same time, it's all down to going on backstage and posting listings, maybe going into Facebook groups, looking for I was interesting. One of my influences, like, that I took for this too, was this film called Keep the Change, which is this love story about two adults who are autistic, and it's a beautiful film. It's on Amazon Prime. In the US, I don't know about other countries, but it's this beautiful story. And I actually just hopped, it was 2 weeks ago, April 1st, that's 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah, I was on the phone, or I was on a Zoom with the director, because I had found her email, and I reached out and said, hey, can we have a Zoom? I want to talk to you about this. She's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, and it was the casting process is very similar, very different in that sometimes when you cast the actors, especially not neurodiverse actors, you might have to rewrite the characters, which has happened on occasion. There are certain things that have like changed since we've casted Sam, since we've casted Jack, we've casted pretty much every character, and it's trying to figure out what things to do, like trying to work with people, like, do you care about personal space or being touched? Do you not like lights on your face? Do you not like all these things? There are all these questions, and it's these more questions that have to feed into how we're going to film this and how we're going to create this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you're finding things that are going to have to happen later on in production just during the casting process, which is maybe nice in a way. You can plan ahead a little bit, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving parts. I would agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
exactly.
it's interesting. I bet it's a lot larger scale too than some of the other stuff you worked on, which must
Yeah.
be a nice thing for you. Like you're moving in that way.
It's nice, but at the same time, it still doesn't feel any different because I'm still telling stories that I'm passionate about. It's not like I'm selling out or anything. I'm telling the stories that I want to tell. It's the stories that I think people want to see, and
Right.
stories that people haven't seen.
Yeah.
And
totally. Now, speaking of casting and assembling a team for this project, and any project, knowing you, I know that having a diverse set in cast and crew in any sense of the word is super important to you. And maybe this is a super obvious answer, but I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to why it's important to you. Specifically, maybe if there's an experience you've had that's kind of highlighted it, or it's just always been important to you. If you could just speak to that a little bit. How did you let's say develop that importance as a filmmaker of having a diverse cast and crew?
Well, it's this interesting. So when you see a character on screen a lot of the time, right? You can see a famous actor playing a person who's deaf, let's say, and doing sign language, but they just learned sign language for the movie. They don't really speak with emotion or speak, or you see somebody in a wheelchair and it's just it's just them pretending to be in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And I get acting is putting yourself in the shoes of another person. I've taken a few acting classes now, so I understand that concept. But for me, honestly, it I don't. A lot of the times, like people in wheelchairs, people with autism, people with ADHD aren't getting these roles, and a lot of the times the actors playing them don't have access to people like that, and they're just doing it based off of offensive or portrayals that they've seen before, which is just, like I said before, creating this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where you know it's going to be inaccurate. And to me, I feel watching specifically a recent example of this would be a movie that just came out this year. Not going to name it because I don't want to give it more traction, but it had a neurotypical actor playing an autistic lead, and the autistic lead, and it was very. It felt like she was wearing a skin, and it was this creepy feeling where it was like it. You can't really. For the people, like with me specifically, like at least my ADHD, when people say, "Oh, I think everybody has ADHD," no, no, you don't. It's you're trying to take something that sometimes can cause me a lot of pain and bring it into to make
Minimize.
yourself feel good. Yeah, which is just a terrible thing overall. And, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I think that you having personal experience um, makes it an obvious choice, right? Wanting to cast anyone who is deserving of the role, and it almost sucks that it is that personal experience that makes you realize the importance of having a diverse cast and crew, because it's just like that should just be the standard in the entire film industry. You shouldn't have to
Exactly.
have um, ADHD, or you shouldn't have to have autism, or you shouldn't have to be a woman or be a Black person who has been excluded based on something so superficial to want to have a diverse set, right? It should just be anybody. It should be the biggest directors in the world wanting to make that a priority, to have a diverse cast and crew just from the get-go, just based on anybody who wants to be in the production, right? And who's qualified for it. Yeah, I think it's an obvious answer, right? Because I have that experience, and I want to provide work for other people, and I want to work with diverse people. But yeah, I think it's a lot. I think it's interesting when you ask that. Why isn't it just the standard? Why should you have to have the experience of being a person who's discriminated against to want diversity? It should just be everyone. So I think that's interesting. Definitely an interesting thing to bring to the table in the conversation. I think that word is used a lot today, conversation, but it's definitely a conversation that's happening. Another conversation, I'm going to overuse that word, that's happening surrounds the lens of the female. And obviously we've mentioned that Sam is basically a lot of the story is told through Sam's perspective. You obviously are not a woman. I mean, yeah. I'm wondering what was behind the decision to make Sam a girl, if you just want to reiterate that, or if she just came to your mind and was just, the character was just a girl in your mind.
Yeah, well, I knew I wanted Sam to be a female because I hadn't seen a female with ADHD portrayed on screen properly, and I thought, and it created quite a bit of challenge because I'm not sure I have ADHD, but ADHD in women is very different than ADHD in men. So it's this unique thing where I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, would somebody, and great, there's people that I've worked with, person who designed our logo, Gabriella Kuferman, she helped me with this a lot, and working with Jessica, who's playing Sam, she brought a lot to this too, where it was like, became more and more, and I can check with them and see how they've experienced it in their lives, and bringing that experience of real life to it changed it a lot, but also telling the story through the lens of these two are female, I thought was very important, because you don't see too many stories with a female. You don't see too many female-led casts that don't try and like sugarcoat things, or don't try and like see, because like whenever, like, I can't speak for yourself, but whenever you watch a show that's like a sitcom that has a female lead, oftentimes they get trouble with dating or boys or whatever, and we're not really doing that stuff, because sure, there's going to be like in the grand scheme of things, there's going to be like one or two crushes, but it's not going to be like their whole life revolves around that stuff. It's going to be their life revolves around themselves and trying to fit in and find themselves. It's not revolving around somebody else, because that too is another thing where with specifically stories with people with disabilities, most of the main cast usually has their lives revolve around the character that has a disability, and I wanted to change that perspective. And I think also having two leads with two very like similar but different disabilities that aren't easily seen. Like you can't just look at them and say, "Oh yeah, no, they're disabled." It's very unique.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think it's funny that you mentioned too how women's stories aren't often told just by they're not often represented by their personality, and it's not often surrounding like a deeper issue. It's more just about boys, and it's very surface level stuff. It's been that way for a long time. I think things are definitely changing now, but there could never be enough of different perspectives. So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that. I was going to ask you how do you plan on making sure that you are properly representing her voice as a female, and including different themes that are important to females, especially young females today. But you mentioned that you are working with Jessica closely, and you mentioned Gabriella as well.
And
so I think
we also have, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but we also have an amazing cinematographer that I'm not gonna just one of my goals was to have a female cinematographer because I thought that it's the story. I didn't want to have the male gaze present in the show. And working, there was this, and me and Emily, our cinematographer, who you'll get to meet her. You guys will get to meet her one of these days. She's great, and she's really trying, like, we're taking references more from female-led and written stuff than male stuff, which is what the industry is pretty much built on, which is very unique for me because my influences usually come from male filmmakers. So taking this with female filmmakers and this different approach has just been surreal and different and amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome that you mentioned too your film education, let's say, has been a lot of male-driven things. Mine as well. I think a lot of people could say that, and I think it's so important that you've designated a female cinematographer, because it's literally we use the word lens, right? I say what's your lens as a filmmaker, right? But literally you're having the story be told through a female lens. She's actually the camera. It's her lens and her gaze. So I think there's depending on the cinematographer, of course, but there's definitely certain subtleties and different different depth that you get through different cinematographers, and I think making it a woman is a really great choice. Now we talked about neurotypical. That was my next question was about neurodiverse people being portrayed in the media. I was wondering, you talked about it, and it's important. I'm wondering if you could speak to a situation in which would it ever be okay for a neurotypical actor to play a neurodiverse character? Can you think of any situation? If not, that's okay.
So in my opinion, no, right? That's a very cut and dry opinion. But it's like, to me, there's also this thing then too where first, I don't think it's ever okay. But there are people, like, for example, sometimes a role may require, somebody to walk for the first half, let's say, and then all of a sudden they don't walk, right? And they have to be in a wheelchair. So how do you go around that? There's roles where gay people be portraying straight men and vice versa. Does that mean, if we say, like, never, does that exclude those circumstances where that stuff might be happening? But to me, it's just very important to make sure that you have those voices at least in the room. You have those people. Even, like, let's say like, oh, I couldn't have a neurodiverse cast for this, which I wouldn't be making this if I didn't have a neurodiverse cast, but let's pretend. I would make sure that every single person behind the camera, or not every single person, but at least somebody had that experience, at least grew up being, let's say, grew up with being autistic. Like we have somebody on set making sure we're doing what's right or wrong, and have a few people we'd work with. You work with organizations that actually are run by and employ people with these conditions that would, and not run by neurotypical or typical people, that you're making sure that you're doing the voices justice. And to me, like I said, my personal thing is that no, never, don't ever do it. But there's an argument to be made for the other side, which I don't think it's wrong. It's just something personally I would never do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think given the opportunity to tell a neurodiverse story, I think it would be important for any filmmaker to try their absolute hardest to ensure that they have as much accurate representation as they have. And I think you're saying, like, if there was this, you don't want to say never because that's limiting, and you don't want to be that kind of a person. But you're saying that there's certain situations where it's kind of, you just want the voice to be represented as accurately as possible and as full as possible, as rounded as possible. And I would totally agree with you, especially in working with different organizations that could lend a hand, and actual people who are neurodiverse on set through the whole process. It would be really important to have that kind of, not only to amplify voices. You don't want to just amplify voices, sorry. You want to make sure that those voices are loud and clear, they're accurate. Yeah, so I really like your answer there. We do have 1 minute remaining. Instagram has notified me.
Yeah.
I only have a few more questions for you, so we can jump out and jump back in if you wanted to, and
Yeah.
finish it up. Okay, I will end this and I will be back.
Okay.